Check, check.
Check, check.
I'd like to call this Council in Budget Committee meeting to order. And before we proceed further, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are meeting here at Town Hall and in various locations around the municipality is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe people, many of whom continue to reside in our community and add to the richness of our community life. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of council are present, Your Worship, with the exception of Councillor Zanko.
Thank you. There are no announcements and there's no addendum this evening. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, then I am going to hand the chair over to the chair of the Finance Committee, Councillor or Corporate Services, Councillor McDermott.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're going to be dealing with the water and sewer operating budget this evening, and we'll start out with a presentation of our Treasurer, Jonathan Jansen. Jonathan?
Okay. Welcome here, everyone, and welcome to our water waste budget evening. Thanks to all those attending, including those who are streaming online. The presentation is, again, on our website, and it's available on our e-agenda for those of you that want to follow along. So tonight's agenda is to present the budget in 6 parts. This is very much in keeping with last year's presentation, where we'll look at the different service delivery aspects of our water and wastewater services, the budget inputs and rate setting exercises, risks and opportunities, and conclude with next steps. And then we'll answer any presentation questions at that point. Also tonight we'll be following the water wastewater budget, a review of the fees and charges report, which is CBC 03. Containing any changes to fees for the 2022 year as well. So the next 4 slides give an overview of delivering the town's water and wastewater services. Everything noted here in summary from the number of customers at approximately 14,000, which is heavily weighted to our residential users compared to our ICI, which is industrial, institutional, and commercial. The system is quite large and expansive with 278 kilometers of water mains and 198 kilometers of sanitary sewers, not to mention the many number of other components that a system like ours would have with valves, hydrants, flushing, and sampling units, things like that. Legislative requirements are a big component to developing the budget and delivering the service. We're governed by the province's Safe Drinking Water Act. We're also mandated to recover all of our costs of the water and wastewater system through this budget. So tonight this has nothing in relationship to what is raised through taxes. There is some relationship with shared services and supporting services to this budget that you'll see later, but it is budgeted to be fully cost recovered from the water and wastewater charges. We take great pride in our system and the reliability it has, and we note here that our goals are for it to be safe, available, and for to have adequate flow and pressure. And on the wastewater side, some similar goals, but conscious of the impacts there as well to our private property and the environment as well. All of this is essential to the quality of life for our residents, and we have a number of areas that we always target to deal with that quality of life. The last one there, most relevant for tonight, being cost control. Council's familiar with the responsibilities, but it is always a good opportunity to look at who's involved with this budget. Municipal officials yourselves are involved and take the highest level of ownership, and you will see documents from time to time shared with you signing off on those responsibilities. There's training that is made available. But then we do like to highlight how the system involves a number of the different departments and divisions with our corporate and community services group. here at Town Hall, we have in the Finance Division, we have our Tax and Water Division, the water part relevant to tonight, doing the billing and collections. We also have our Customer Service Group at the front desks, our Digital Services Group supporting, and really all of Town Hall staff supporting water and wastewater operations in many different ways. But then most directly, Infrastructure Services, with the engineering and capital programs, operation and maintenance program run out of our Gibson Center, and dealing with all the compliance needs as well as customer service there directly as well. The operating system has a number of key commitments here as well. This just goes into highlighting a few more with the level of attention that we give for conformance and maintenance of accreditation within the province. Water is a very sensitive system, so there's lots of testing and reporting involved with that. And a couple of the key programs that really do have direct impacts on the costs to run the system are reducing our infiltration into our wastewater system. Our capital program, which you approved back on November 17th, includes a number of initiatives that are always addressing those and trying to reduce the costs associated with that, as well as reducing unbilled or non-revenue water volumes. A number of issues or items there, from leak detection to pressure monitoring and acoustic detection. Excuse me. Operational challenges. We have a geographic and a geological challenge generally in the town here, where we have relatively low number of customers per kilometer of infrastructure, which certainly is a big impact when we're trying to recover costs, because the nature of this budget is very infrastructure heavy. So having fewer number of customers per kilometer is a great impact and a challenge to us. And geology as well, we have a relatively high bedrock, so when we're installing and doing contract works to put in our system, relatively more expensive, as well as our water tables being close to the lake and having a system that's near to a lot of wetland areas. Water main breaks. This is one of the ways we monitor our services with our asset management plan, keeping or targeting to have those be as low as possible. In 2020, we had 29, which is lower than our average of 50. And in 2021, we're projecting we'll be somewhere around 35 for the year at the current rate. So tracking well for this year as well. Legislative requirements, again, are certainly an operational challenge as we grow and as we adopt new areas and projects into our system. The meter program has been ongoing for many years, and we've switched in the last couple of years to a focus now on commercial and industrial meter replacement. And those are more complex needs and issues typically with those, but it does have the opportunity to also enhance what we're able to bill by having greater system accuracy. We're also upgrading our meter software this year with a conversion in 2022 to make sure our software is running well. Work orders are a coordination, again, with our billing group and our operations group to make sure any meter reading issues or meter readings are valid and accurate as possible. And then a note as well with COVID-19, I did touch last year on how volumes have been shown to be impact with the change in patterns of work locations and business impacts as well. But certainly on the operational side, there are challenges with adapting to that during COVID, particularly at the height of that, with staffing schedules and protocols to respond to that. So for developing the customer rates, we take the budget inputs that include all of our expenses and our non-billed or other revenues. So that includes the treatment costs from the region, our town expenses to operate the system, which again capture all of the departments I mentioned earlier, as well as any available financing that we can apply, particularly to keep our rates smooth from year to year, so we're not seeing larger swings or rate changes in any one particular year. Then with the rate setting, we're not proposing any changes to the approach this year, but we develop a base or a fixed charge and a variable charge on how we take those costs and recoup those costs through the customers. So for 2022, total expenses are $20.6 million. These items are shown in Appendix 1, which also shows the prior actual and budget, as well as 5 years of forecast periods. Appendix 2 in the report shows the highlighted changes year over year of the budget as well. Here you can see the largest, and it's increased slightly again from last year, is the regional treatment costs at 60%. So of all of our bills, a full 60% is going to the cost that we pay the region for treating the volumes with that. The total, the $20.6 million, is higher than the total amount that we, than the rate revenues, because there are a couple other revenue sources you'll see later. So with just focusing in on the regional treatment costs, this year it's an increase of $617,000 or 3.16%. There's a number of changes there. We've benefited on the water volumes side of our proportionate share of regional treatment costs, with our water volume going down 1.2%, but that is the same amount actually that the wastewater share is going up. So on the whole, it's staying relatively stable. Approximately, well, I did note the 60% is the town's budget is with regional treatment costs. And just for context, the region did meet on November 4th and had their bylaw to approve that recently. That 60% share of our town budget is increasing by 5.15%. This is the same rate, and you'll see some history coming up in a few slides, but this is the same increase that we've seen in past years, which accommodates their strategy to increase their capital investment needs as well. And as we've seen in most of recent years, we're really challenged more so on the wastewater side. That increase is 5.84%, and the water increase to 60% of our budget is 3.99%. And the region has shown recently in their presentations as well that they are forecasting that same 5.15% throughout the forecast period that we've brought to you tonight. So I won't spend too much time on this. There's no change in the regional billing formulas. This goes back as far as 2009 for water and 2007 for wastewater, with the way that the lower tier municipalities are charged for our share of treatment costs. This has been studied a couple times, and this is considered the fairest way to deal with that. It's not easy to deal with changes and swings in volumes, but particularly on the wastewater side, the 3-year reconciliation allows municipalities sometime after the current year experience of cost to then address changes in those costs and to be charged in future years for that. The town expenses combined with other revenue is an increase of $282,000 or 1.44%. This includes an inflationary increase with our capital reserve transfers of 3.5%. I'll note later this under a risk as well, because as many of you would have seen, inflation is showing to be trending even higher. This includes some increases in other revenues. We do collect fees for a number of different services, particularly related to development and expansion of our system. An increase to our wages and benefits of $76,000. That's in keeping with our collective bargaining agreement and our negotiated benefits for staff. An increase to our materials and services of $223,000. Again, this supports a number of the programs that we noted and includes overhead costs. This year it also includes 2 studies, each worth $50,000 to enhance our system. And then lastly our debt charges are stable. You'll note that we did bring forward a few debt proposals with our capital budget, but none of those are related to our water wastewater budget. And the next time we have maturities in our debt for the rate is in 2025 for water and 2031 for our wastewater system. Financial assistance, and just a note with these three areas, I have included hyperlinks. If you are following along with the document, you should be able to link to those programs on our website to help you share those or be more familiar yourself. The Water Emergency Relief Fund is $8,000 in the budget for low-income families. The SURF program, the Seniors Utility Relief Fund, we did increase last year by 25% from $100 per successful application to $125, and we've increased it slightly. Although in that case, we've always come close to the budget amount, but we've never turned anyone away. So that is a budget amount that we would consider adjusting if we were to have a higher number of applications. And then the last one is the largest, actually. It's the extraneous flow reduction program, where we'll work with our customers to provide subsidies for works that they're doing and reimburse them that helps the town reduce any inflow and infiltration. So we are very strategic with our use of reserves, and this year the use of reserves is a decrease in the budget of $393,000. We're increasing our transfer from our operating reserves of $200,000. That's in part to fund those two one-time studies I noted, as well as capturing the other $100,000 is reflecting the fact that the long-term forecast for that operating reserve is healthy, and while we don't want to rely on it every year to help reduce the rates, we are realizing that it would be wise to help address some of our rate increase pressures this year. There's an increase in transfers from our reserves as well for the reconciliation that I mentioned. Last year, we were fortunate to have a credit of almost $300,000. This year, we've changed to a charge of $100,000, so almost $400,000 change there. And so thankfully, with having these reserves set aside, that impact doesn't affect any one given year by using transferring it to the reserve in the good years and then drawing on it for those years that we have charges owing to the region. And the last one there is increase in strategic asset management plan contributions. So as you may recall from the capital, this was noted in that report. So this $70,000 is the last of the identified gaps from our 2019 asset management plan. So that is certainly very good news. We always caution that asset management plan is a point in time, and it's also reliant on information, and in some cases information that's not as reliable or as detailed as we would like. So we're spending considerable funds through the operating budget of both the levy and on the water wastewater side to increase our knowledge and our condition assessment data so that we can refine that better. So that $70,000 is on the wastewater side, and that fulfills the last of those items. So that is something to celebrate tonight with caution again. And then the $136,000, that is the 3.5% that I noted earlier that we're increasing the contribution to reserves based on CPI. And this follows that. So on the capital reserve funding side, the proposed 22 changes bring us from the percent of target last year of almost there of 98% to with this budget 100%. So again, great credit to Mayor and Council of this term and even the prior term with having started some excellent strategies and continued through on those and making difficult decisions to get us there. Again, cautioning that this is always a work in progress, but that is something to pause and celebrate. 100% of our water and wastewater infrastructure gap at this point has been addressed. So a summary of the changes to the water wastewater budget. We take our 2021 prior rate revenue of $19.496 million. You look at the net Fort Erie, our own town expense changes, that's 1.48% in the right column. That's we benefit slightly from our overall volume changes, which also does reflect the work that we've done in keeping our capital as much a priority and up to date as possible. And then the regional cost change of 3.17%. So when you total those all up together, it's a 4.39% increase to the budget. We'll talk about that in terms of how the rate setting impacts the bottom line for the average household later. But here you can see the total budget change of 4.39% with 3.17% of that being from the regional budget changes. This is just a breakdown to generate those required revenues. 57% is from wastewater, and again, that has been increasing proportionately over years. You'll see that when it comes to the rates that water is stable and in fact decreasing, and wastewater continues to have large pressures. Water billings is 41%, and then, as I noted earlier, there are a couple other sources from fees, from interest and penalties, as well as some local improvement charges. Those will be expiring in the next few years as well. So with our volumes, this is a really interesting graph where in the light graph, you can see the way the town has budgeted for the volumes that we are billing our customers. So the light blue at the top, back in 2014, we were budgeting that we would bill our customers over 3.2 million cubic meters, I believe it is, whereas the actual was considerably lower. And you can see that as well for the wastewater lines as well, where there was a wide gap that had formed over years. It's difficult to predict, so it can fluctuate, you can see, from any given year, but there's been a lot of effort with the budget to bring that light line graph down to be in line with the actuals, and it is always a forecasting and a predicting game. Weather is a large impact, of course, but the fact that we're lining up much closer and more predictably with the actual consumptions is good news, and that gives us greater stability. And just going back to that as well, it's interesting to note this in the context of being a growing community, that despite increase in number of households and so on, we continue to see the actual volumes going lower and lower, and we would attribute this to a number of things, but certainly there are more efficiencies in the way we consume water these days. So the 2022 consumption volumes, this follows that graph. What we're doing is with our water consumption, we're not changing it from 2021. So if I go back to that graph, you can see that light budget line is very much, there's no change from last year. We're seeing a stabilization there to justify keeping that, and it's in line with the 3 to 5 year average. And then on the wastewater side, we're decreasing that treatment another 1%, so we believe that they're still seeing that come down over time, and that makes us very close to our 5 year average. We bill both a base charge and a volumetric charge. So for the base charge, we're proposing it increases this year to $67.55. We have a strategy to move proportionately to have the base charge be less, and we'll show that in a little bit. But right now, that's on the water side, it's actually a slight decrease over last year. And on the wastewater side, the base is a 2% increase over 2021. In Niagara, the base average is 45%, so it is always interesting to see how others do this, and I'm sure we all hear different comparisons, both within Niagara and outside Niagara, but within Niagara, we're getting much closer to that average of 45%. You'll see a lot of variation there as well, some much higher, some much lower. Fort Erie with the base rate in 2021 was we were at 54%. This coming year is 53%. So again, coming down towards that last bullet there, showing that the 5 year forecast is for that proportionately to decrease to 50%. Fort Erie has the third highest base charge in Niagara. And again, it does reflect the nature of the costs of our system and its stable revenues. So there's good rationale to do so. I think I Right, so this is some excellent news for the town. This is a graph I present every year. The middle graph line is the average for Niagara of the municipal burden. And we show this one because we have relatively high water and sewer rates, but we have relatively low tax rates. And municipal burden is important because it combines both. And we find with municipalities, there's quite a bit of variation in how the levy can be used to support the water and wastewater rates as well. So this is an important comparison overall with what the town is billing you. So last year we were slightly above average, and it's great to see that Fort Erie is trending lower. We've moved a couple spots and are now the fourth lowest for total municipal burden in Niagara. They did change this study this year provincially so that our group now excludes Hamilton, so I think that's helpful to see that excluded. You do also see both Waynfleet and Grimsby excluded because they have some challenges with reporting, or they, in the case of Waynfleet, they don't have a system the same way we would. So the average for Niagara is $4,954. The average is $4,954 in Niagara, and Fort Erie is $4,894. So we've talked about the base rates. On the volumetric rates, this certainly is valuable with helping issues in areas of control and conservation. The proposed volumetric total rate is proposed to go from $3.51 to $3.73, or a 6.1% increase. So higher than the base percent increases, and we'll look at the combined overall impact shortly. And here you can see the comparisons again within Niagara, an average of $3.20. So we're higher than that. The minimum is considerably lower actually this year because our neighbor Port Colborne moved to a 100% fixed charge with their wastewater. And then you do see a maximum there of $4.74. And I believe that's Welland. So our rate of $3.73 there is above that Niagara average. So for the average household, we continue to use 16 cubic meters so for consistency. Here you can see all of those combined impacts for both water and wastewater, and for both the base and the rate or volumetric charges. So water on the third row there is a total percentage decrease of 0.1%. Water is an overall 5.78% increase. For the average household having a monthly or an annual bill increase of 3.45%. The average household cost is increasing to $4.18 per day for 2022. And again, that's based on 16 cubic meters per month. So this graph is a little bit, a lot of things going on here, but I think some important things we've expanded this year to show how our rates are changing over time. This includes in the 2022 column to the right, the current proposed increase of the 3.45%. When you look over the last number of years, the average for that period is 2.9%. You'll see at the bottom there noted that the forecast for the 5-year forecast period is coincidentally the same. It's 3.45%, and it includes the full 5.15% increase of the region. So the other numbers there that we're showing, or first of all with the graphs, the bars, the light blue is the town base changes, and the dark blue shows the capital increases. So a lot of the work we're talking about with addressing our infrastructure gap, if you remove those, then there's certainly different stories in those years. To the extent that in 2021, had we not included and made effort to continue with the capital gains, we would have actually had an overall negative or a decrease to the water and wastewater bill. So that shows that. Then the light red or the reddish line there shows the Ontario CPI, which is what we note in all our budget planning documents. It is a point in time, so we would caution that, it's not always reflective of the costs and pressures for our system. But you can see that in some ways, especially during this term of council, that the rate has reflected that in some ways, especially when you look at last year. Of particular note for this year, and it's something we already raised as well during the capital budget, is when you look at the top right there, that bar is heading and ending at 3.5%, which is what the rate was for the 12 months ending June of this last summer when we prepared the initial budget guidance. Since then, it went to 4.4, and then most recently for the month of October, released in the middle of November, it was actually 4.9%. So you can see the trends and the pressures and the impacts, not unique to this budget, but that are impacting here. And then finally, again, that regional budget increase, the 5.15 in both 19 and 20 was reduced in 2021 to 2%, but again, this year is the 5.15%. So you can see how with both of those are easily shown here to be direct impacts and pressures on what we're experiencing with our rates. Some notable risks, some of these have come up already, but volumetric rate, so there's clear benefits of having a higher base charge, but we are trying to find a spot where we're more in keeping with the averages, both here in Niagara and provincially, but there is revenue risk from having volume variances, especially during a period like COVID, where consumption can change more drastically. The second one there is part of that as well with weather, where we always appreciate hot, dry summers as well, from not only from greater consumption typically, but probably the bigger issue with that is the infiltration that comes with snow melt and with wet seasonal conditions. So weather is a big factor. Billing frequency is something we've discussed in the past and brought forward a couple reports in the last, dating back a number of years, but the last report did approve the monthly billing frequency, and that's based more recently when we reviewed it on American Water Works Association best practices. It's very much in keeping with other utilities that residents receive and assist with cash flow. I know our neighboring Port Colborne recently moved to monthly billing as well, so something that we have seen generally to be a best practice. Legislative compliance, there's ongoing risks and pressures from that we've touched on. Comparisons, we do compare relatively high on the residential, but when the BMA study, when we look at that, we tend to compare more favorably on the non-residential rates. And then again, inflation trending higher than 3.5%. So as we noted during the capital budget, 3.5% was a bit of a compromise this year to keep with something to keep us moving, but certainly not proposing some of the higher numbers on the most recent construction index that's in our fees report noted for our DCs. That's an 11.6% increase, so a lot of pressures on the inflation and risks to keeping up for any municipality with your capital programs. Opportunities, we are still below the provincial averages in the case of water and sewer, but we are using them well and making good progress in the longer term with those, so that does give us greater opportunities to find stable increases and also make progress with our system. Grant funding is something that we're always looking eagerly to maximize as much as we can for our system and take advantage of everything we can. The CSO program there is a Region of Niagara program for combined sewer overflow, something we do our very best to maximize applications to that. And the OSIF is something that we included an estimate of $1 million already in our capital budget, and we will update further once information for that is available to be made public. Meter changeout program has a lot of opportunities. We're seeing definitely improvements to our unbilled or non-revenue water as we have meters replaced. Condition assessments, as of course we gain some more of that information. Personally, I would love to be surprised and see that some of our condition assessments indicate maybe that we're further ahead than we thought, but realistically, it's bound to show many areas for improvement as well. And then extraneous flows, I mean, every dollar we spend on that is helping us in the longer term to reduce waste from extraneous flows in our system. So key messages in summary, the town increase to the budget is about 1.22%. When combined with a region of 3.17%, that is a 4.39%. When you take all of those costs and attribute it to households based on our projected volumes, that's an increase in the bill, bottom line with the rates that we're proposing in the recommendations of 3.45%. Key message, again, is the good news of our capital. With this budget, all infrastructure gaps identified in that most recent AMP are funded with reserve transfers. Debt, no new debt again, and expiring debt maturing in the future will provide additional options and opportunities for us to consider. We try to summarize and keep this as high level as we can, but there is more information on our website. We have a number of frequently asked questions that address some of the more common questions and requests that we get, and I'm sure you do as well as council. So for anyone listening, there is some available questions or resources there. Certainly feel free to call the town. My own contact number is at the end of the presentation as well for any further questions. So the next steps, this coming Monday, we have our preliminary capital budget approval bylaw for the first part of our capital. The bylaw related to tonight's presentation is scheduled for the January 17th council meeting, both the water and wastewater and the fees, and then the levy as noted below. Thanks again to the many people and staff and all of you for your involvement and support of getting the budget to this point. I'm done my presentation. I'll return the chair to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Dubanow?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mr. Jansen, thank you very much for your presentation this evening. I'm just wondering if you could bring up, I think it was slide 15, which showed our funding. Yeah, this one right here. So I just quickly to look at this. So the 2022 proposed amounts here would meet 100%, it looks like, of our capital reserve funding, which just a quick comment, I think that's phenomenal. I think it goes without saying that this is always a challenge for municipalities, so to be at 100% is significant. But I'm just wondering, we're sitting at an increase combined this year of 3.45%, and we have that 100% funding. I'm just wondering, without throwing out any names, where do we sit as far as other municipalities in the region go, as far as, the not only the capital reserve funding, but also what kind of increases we're looking at, just to give residents an idea of where we stand?
Mr. Jansen?
Through your chair to Councillor Dubanow. On the asset management side, I know municipalities are in various states of preparation of that. There is an upcoming deadline for the province for this coming year at the end of June. I think we'll find a lot more comparable information at that point. I think at this point, most municipalities have prepared their own asset management plans. There unfortunately is not a lot of good comparable information for us. I know anecdotally, it would seem that we're one of very few that are in this position, or that at least are talking about it. But I know others are doing a lot of work to try and get there as well. What you'll see in other areas, I know some are using a separate levy with your bill, particularly on the tax side, to show the need to dedicate those funds for that purpose and to move there. And then the second part was just on the rates itself. I think many municipalities have still yet to gone through this process. I know there's probably 4 or 5 that have already presented preliminary numbers. I'm not sure where those would be with final approvals, but I know I have seen at least a couple in high single digits, lots of different pressures as we've shown as well tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jansen. And just a quick comment with regard to the state of municipalities with the capital reserve funding and asset management. That's a significant point, and I think it's credit to you, credit to your staff, and credit to council here, because that like you said, anecdotally, that there seems to be a lot of, that we're in a better situation. And just to highlight that, going back to AMO, the Association of Municipalities Conference back in 2019, when the mayor and Councillor Noyes were meeting with the Ministry of Infrastructure, his worship had mentioned that we were nearing 100% funding, and all of their heads flew right up, and they were surprised by that. So this is a credit to your staff, credit to council. Thank you very much for all the work you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Councillor McDermott, too. Mr. Jansen, thank you for your presentation. It's always very understandable. I think I've said this every time I talk to you. I understand it, the way you explain it, which is great. Just in really simple terms, it's about $1 more per week for the average household, like $51.
Right. Through you, Chair, to Councillor Noyes. In this graph, you can see the total increases by month, so about $4.24. And I think the average per day last year was about, well, if someone could do quicker math than me, you could probably figure that out. But yeah, that $4.24 is the monthly amount, and then $51 over the span of the year for that 3.45%. I think it roughly translates into about 14 cents a day.
All right, thank you.
Your worship?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Jansen, for that always enlightening presentation. And Councillor Dubanow has mentioned it. I know councillors throughout the year comment on the diligence of our staff, and I think it's so it is $1 a week, maybe 14 cents a day. I think what people have to appreciate is, and this is difficult because we're going through a time where people have a lot of economic pressures. The last one they need is to find out that a utility charge is going up. But when we look at the global situation in terms of what we're talking about clean drinking water, and we're talking about the mandates from the provincial government, which I'm sure have a part to play in the responsibilities we have. I wonder if you could comment on that. The ever increasing, it's been going on for 25 years, most particularly since Walkerton those many years ago. But that obviously has an impact. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Mr. Jansen?
Through you, Chair, to the Mayor. Yeah, we've managed to not bring forward staffing pressures in relation to our budget, but I know initially with DWQMS, which is the Drinking Water Quality Management System that was brought in, there was absolute pressures to that. We're going to see staffing pressures continue, but you're right. The legislative framework was brought on very quick and very heavy and very helpful too. I mean, for a system that is, like I said, so sensitive with it being drinkable water, it's something that you can never take quite too seriously enough. So there's a number of audits that we undergo, a lot of different reporting to ensure that the quality is there. So the province does mandate that, and there is an expectation that that will only grow over time as well. So there's a lot of legislative oversight pressures.
I note, Chair, that, and it was referred to during the presentation, that the water usage seems to be going down, which means people presumably are being more frugal and more environmentally conscious. But the reality is the water itself is part of the cost. A large part, and you also referred to this, was the infrastructure that's in the ground, 270-something kilometers of water lines, whatever number of sewer lines. And what's the implications if we don't continuously fund our asset management plan targets so that we are able to pay for the repairs and maintenance and revitalization of that system? What are the implications long-term?
Mr. Jansen?
Through Chair to the Mayor. We always like to compare it to home ownership even, where, the implications of not putting funds aside from the worst case of not having the funds and needing to defer things that are important to be done, or taking on more debt than may otherwise be healthy or wise. Ultimately as well, there is a real relationship, as we've seen, with the amount that we're investing in our system and the efficiency and the reduced waste in our system, particularly with where we live and the nature, again, geologically of where we are. A well-maintained system has real direct benefits long-term to reducing as much waste. Municipalities are often in the news for lost water, for finding issues where there's waste or major infiltration issues. So having that system be as well-maintained as possible really helps our own bottom line.
If I might, Chair, you did show a graph on slide 21, which was the comparison. And I know a few years ago, as you had mentioned, Fort Erie was someplace to the right. We're now to the left, and I presume that a lot of that has to do with the work that's been done on our infrastructure to make sure that we're keeping costs at least as low as possible in that regard, because we've done the heavy lifting to this point. And I guess that's why some of the other municipalities are to the right, because they're now having to face that reality.
Mr. Jansen?
Yeah, through you, Chair. It's very difficult to compare systems. I know we talk about densities, we talk about age of system. Some systems are much more contained within an urban area. Some are higher in elevation, and therefore they benefit from gravity, where gravity is pulling water away from their system. So, I can appreciate with any one of these municipalities, there's different challenges, but on the infrastructure long-term planning side, that's something where we've had a plan and we've stuck to it and we've met that challenge as of now, and that we should continue to benefit in many ways. There'll be other challenges that will come, but we should be able to benefit in many ways from that going forward.
Thank you. If I might, we know that there's been growth going on in Fort Erie. We know that there are more households. Presumably they're assisting in sharing the burden. Is that having any noticeable impact on what the rates would be? In other words, if we had less growth, would we have higher rates? Or if we had more growth, would we have lower rates?
Mr. Jansen?
Yeah, we do benefit in this case from density, so growth is assisting with us. This budget does capture that, so if we were not growing, there would be some smaller challenges. As I noted near the start, we have approximately 14,000 customers. For each additional customer, there is a base component. And I mean, if it's a new growth area, then we're also using development charges, which are key to keeping costs for existing users down. So once those areas are brought into our system, there's an opportunity there to help address our rates through the benefit of density. So we have captured and estimated in this budget growth of an additional, I think it was 200 approximately households. So these rates are showing with those additional 200 households in the system.
And then I don't want to be too harsh with the region, but just looking at the numbers, the reality is that of the 3.45% increase that's being proposed in the report, and from 3/4 of that stems from the region's increase, where they simply adopt two numbers, one for water, one for wastewater, and say we're going to charge this for 10 years. That seems to be the lazy man's way of budgeting, I would think. I don't want you to comment on that. That was rhetorical, but the reality is that about 3/4 of the responsibility for the increase rests with the region, does it not?
That is correct, yes. And yeah, I would say, they are in a similar position to many municipalities, and even to where we've been. We've benefited from a longer term approach. So in many ways, they're doing the right thing. They need to address this, as all municipalities do. And unfortunately, when it's looked at on a 10-year horizon, it does impact all the lower tiers as well.
And then finally, Chair, we've done a lot of work trying to determine where water is being lost from our infrastructure, where there's infiltration of groundwater into our wastewater system. This is something that the region has never done. And I presume that you would be happy to hear that the Mayor of Port Colborne and I are collaborating on an effort to get regional council to direct staff to do some of their own investigative work to try to tighten up their systems.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? Okay, then I need a mover for CBC 022022. Councillor Dubanow. I'll read that for the public. The recommendation is that Council approves the 2022 water and wastewater operational budget attached as Appendix 1 to report number CBC 0222, and further, that Council set 2022 water and wastewater rates subject to Regional Council approval of treatment rates effective with billing for January 2022 as follows. 2022 water base rate per month, 25.25. 2022 water rate per cubic meter, 1.465. 2022 wastewater base rate per month, 42.30. 2022 wastewater rate per cubic meter, 2.261, and further that council excludes the capital asset amortization of 1.8 million from the 2022 water and wastewater operating budgets, and further that council directs staff to submit the 2022 water and wastewater operating budget and rates bylaw for council approval on January 17, 2022. Are there any further comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. So, Mr. Jansen, do you want to give us an overview on the 2022 fees and charges?
I don't have a presentation for fees and charges. I would just direct council to the report and the recommendations there. There is an Appendix 1 that does note some of the non-indexing changes for the year, which are just limited to the one page this year. But yeah, the recommendations that I would direct you there.
Okay. So would somebody please move CBC 03-2022? Anybody? Councillor Dubanow? The recommendation reads that council approves the user fees and charges proposed in Appendix 1 to report number CBC 03-2022 and directs staff to submit a bylaw to council, and further that council directs staff to submit a bylaw to council to temporarily waive all business license fees, same and except short-term rentals for 2022 to assist business during COVID-19. Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. Mr. Jansen, you may be seated. Thank you. As we move forward, I just want the public to be aware of the fact that although this seems to run rather smoothly, the reality is that there are a lot of discussions that take place in subdivision committee meetings, also that the staff spends a lot of time working on these various aspects of the budget and the fees. They get a lot of input from others that they work with, and so this is very much like the sports game, if I can use that analogy. Everybody looks like they're in great physical shape and there's nothing to it. But the reality is there's a lot of hard work that goes into this. So it's not an easy task, and it's a challenge. But I want to assure the public that when the staff comes forward with these recommendations at budget time, they are doing their absolute best to make sure that no more than is absolutely necessary is recommended to council. We're doing our best to make sure that people don't have to pay any more than is necessary, bearing in mind that we don't want to be passing on responsibilities to future generations. And that's what the asset management plan really is all about. It's making sure that we here make sure that we fund the costs going forward so that future generations aren't stuck with a bill of goods. The date of the next meeting for our budget deliberations is Wednesday, February the 2nd in the year 2022, and that will be the library assessment analysis and general levy operating budget. There'll be a further meeting on February the 9th if necessary, but at this stage of the game, Councillor Dubanow, I will ask you to lead us out.
Yep, I would be happy to move that Council and Budget Committee adjourn at 6:56 PM this evening, Your Worship.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you all.